Cinda. I'm a local to Nillumbik. I live in Hurstbridge, and I've been working in the home energy efficiency field for probably about 10 years, a bit more, and in sustainability for longer than that. And it's just always been something that's really interested me. I split my time between doing professional home energy efficiency assessments and teaching and doing presentations about the same subject. So that's what I'll be doing today. But I'd like to begin by just acknowledging the Wurundjeri and the beautiful land that we're on today. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present for looking after it so beautifully. And I just found some lovely printouts of the Wurundjeri seasons and was reading a moment ago, and I don't know if you know this, but it's eel season. And the butterfly eels in the creek that run into the Yarra are fat and ready to harvest in March. So I didn't know that. Also, the manna gums are flowering. And I thought this was funny. The hot winds stop and temperatures begin to cool. And I reckon this week is basically that in a nutshell. Hope you're enjoying the rain like I am. So, as I said, this is the introductory session to Power Up Nillumbik. Power Up Nillumbik and Rethink Nillumbik are a specific part of how Council is supporting residents to take climate action. In 2022, Council declared a climate emergency and developed a 10-year plan, and I think we're into year 3, almost year 4 of that plan. And part of that plan is about supporting residents to make changes in their own homes, and so that's what I'm hoping to do tonight. In this presentation today, we'll start by looking at gas versus electricity in terms of cost and emissions and how things have changed, I guess, over the last 10 years or so. What are the benefits of electrifying your home? The key appliances you would want to be electrifying and a few things you might want to know about those, and then where to from here and what you can do to continue the journey. And at this point, actually, along the way, I'll mention different workshops or presentations within this Power Up series that are relevant to the slide that we're on. As an overview of electrification, we actually have a 2-hour Rethink Electrification Masterclass where there'll be a local electrician. He's actually a solar installer but does the whole electrification process. So he'll be there as well as me. And we'll be doing a 2-hour presentation on electrification, so in a lot more detail than today. And there's an optional additional 1 hour where you will give you information that you could collect about your house beforehand, and then we'll spend that hour modelling an actual plan of electrifying your house, and it will give you payback periods and costs and things like that. So if you're sort of ready to just get going and make a plan, that's a really useful thing to do. All right, so cost of gas versus electricity. You know, when I first trained to be a home energy efficiency assessor, we were actually encouraging people to take out electric things and put in gas things. So if you're thinking that gas, if you're confused and thinking, well, isn't gas cheaper and cleaner? Don't feel alone, because for a long time it was. So you're not wrong. It was the case, but it's just that things have changed quite a bit since then. And I'm going to try and explain briefly what has changed. So if you think about 10 years ago, yes, gas was cheaper and had less carbon emissions than now. And in one way, if you just look at the energy contained in those fuels, it's still cheaper and it still has a lower emissions. So at the moment, it's about gas 11 cents. If you convert them back to kilowatt hours, gas 11 cents, electricity 30, and carbon emissions, that chart on the right shows, this is from 2021 anyway, that the gas emissions were, well, emissions from electricity are 5 times more than gas. So you know, if you look at it on face value, it's hard to understand. But there are two really big things that have changed, and one of them is heat pump technology has advanced massively. And what that means is that if you use an efficient heat pump appliance, an electrical heat pump appliance, it's so much more efficient at converting the energy you use into what you want from it, hot water or heat, that changes the playing field completely, and it means that it actually ends up cheaper and with less emissions. We'll talk a tiny bit about heat pumps here, but we'll talk about them in much more detail at the electrification workshop. The other thing that's changed is that we're getting more and more renewables in the grid, and solar power is just coming down in price all the time. It's affordable for so many people, and of course, if you can generate your own energy, it's got no cost if you're using it at the same time, and no direct emissions. So that makes a big difference in the overall picture as well. What is a heat pump? Just briefly, it's a form of technology that instead of using energy to generate heat, it uses energy to collect free heat from the atmosphere and then move it to where we want it. And it does this with fans and refrigerant gas. And that we already have some heat pumps in our homes, like fridges and freezers are heat pumps. Sometimes people say, oh, it's new technology, and they're worried that maybe we don't really know, that it won't last, the test of time. But we already have fridges and freezers. They've gotten a lot better recently, and so have all of the other kinds of heat pumps. So fridges, freezers, reverse cycle air conditioners, and heat pump hot water systems are all examples of heat pump technology. And that's what makes this such a big opportunity in cost savings for our houses, because this chart shows the approximate energy use of each of these things in our houses per year, and you can see that heating and hot water together are just the biggest portion. So imagine if you can swap them over to something that's very energy efficient and you might be able to generate your own energy for. That's really amazing opportunity. What are the benefits then? Definitely savings. Sustainability Victoria estimates that if you convert your gas home over to an all-electric home, you'll save about $2,000 on bills a year, which is nothing to sneeze at. And if you have a solar system, you get an additional $740 of savings. And even a new home will be cheaper by not installing gas. Also, an aspect of it that it's only recent that we've gotten to know it more is the health aspect. There are a lot of emissions that get released when we burn gas inside, and they're all respiratory irritants, and it's become known that they're actually a trigger for asthma. There's a wonderful, if you looked up YouTube and looked up Dr. Genevieve Cowie and gas inside, she's got a great YouTube all about it, and she says there's a similar level of risk of childhood asthma if you cook with gas as if you have a smoker in the house, which is pretty worrying. So for some people, electrifying first and foremost for them is about health and not burning gas inside. And third, and important to me, is that it's one of the best ways that we as a community can have an impact on our contribution to climate change. If we can all change, if we could get a whole movement going and all change over to all electric, it would be the biggest impact on climate this decade, according to Saul Griffith. If you'd like to learn more about electrifying and this whole push to electrify everything, I highly recommend watching the Australian story called The Transformer. There's a little picture on the right that shows that. And the guy is called Saul Griffith. He's fantastic to listen to. It's only a 30-minute episode, and it's really inspiring, and he's very down to earth. And you just come away going, oh yeah, that all makes sense. He's very clever too, so obviously knows what he's talking about. The three main appliance upgrades that you'll be looking at would be heating, hot water, and cooking. Remember back to that chart saying which appliances we spend the most on. Heating is the biggest. So a moment ago I said if health issues are your biggest concern, you might start with a cooktop. If cost is your concern, you would most probably start with heating, especially if you have, say, a gas ducted heating system that uses quite a lot of gas. If you changed over to efficient heat pump heating, that would be a big cost saving. So we'll look at them each briefly. The first one is to upgrade to reverse cycle air conditioning. As I said, that's a heat pump, and just to make things complicated, they're known by a whole lot of different names. And this confused me for ages. So sometimes they would be called split systems, and sometimes they'd be called heat pumps, and sometimes inverters, and sometimes refrigerative coolers, and sometimes reverse cycle air conditioners. The thing is that they're all the same thing. They're called split systems sometimes because they are split into two sections. There's an indoor bit and the outdoor condenser. In New Zealand, apparently, if you say heat pump, you mean a reverse cycle air conditioner, whereas in Australia, if we say heat pump, we generally mean the heat pump hot water system. The thing is, they're both heat pumps, but yeah, this is just the way we name things. An inverter is a kind of technology that's used in heat pumps to make them more efficient. So yeah, I just wanted to clear that up right at the start, because yeah, you'll hear the terms will be interchanged all over the place. So back to the heat pump technology. If you first look at the picture on the right-hand side, that's a resistive plug-in electric heater, and you can see that for 1 kilowatt of electrical energy that it uses, it will give you 1 kilowatt of heat energy. And no matter what sort of plug-in electric heater you have, it's always the same. 1 kilowatt in, 1 kilowatt of heat energy out. Whereas the picture on the left shows the condenser of a reverse cycle air conditioner or a heat pump. It uses 1 kilowatt of electrical energy to power the fan, which pushes air around the refrigerant gas, and that enables it to collect 3 to 5 kilowatts of heat to put out into our rooms if we're on heating mode. So that's pretty significant. There are a whole lot of things that you might be wondering about if this is something you're thinking of, which includes the kind of reverse cycle air conditioner, which could be an individual or a ducted or a multi-head. You might be wondering where to put the inside or outside units, confused about refrigerants or rebates or how big your system should be. And because this is quite a complex topic, we've got a whole separate 1-hour webinar as part of this Power Up series just about reverse cycle air conditioners. So if this is something you're thinking about doing and you'd like to know more, then please come along to that. The whole hour is dedicated to reverse cycle air conditioners. That gives you an idea how much there is to them. There is a rebate. The Victorian Energy Upgrades Program offers rebates for all larger appliance purchases and installation, like reverse cycle air conditioners. And the rebates vary. So for an individual, it's less, 100 to 1,400, depending on how big it is and what it's replacing. The multi-head or the ducted, you get a bigger rebate, but it all depends on what your original system is, what you're installing, where you're located, although if you're in Melbourne, it's all the same, so that doesn't make any difference, and who installs the system. Probably the most important thing that I want to convey, though, is that when there's a really big difference in the price that you get quoted, it's not because one of them has a lot more rebates. Usually the amount of rebates is pretty similar if as you know, your original system was one thing, you're installing another thing, then the rebates are going to be fairly the same. The difference will be in the price of the product. And so it probably means, if it's more expensive, that it's a higher quality product that costs more. And so when you take away the rebates, there's a bigger out-of-pocket cost. Now, because it's possibly the biggest question or the most common question I get asked when I do assessments is, I don't understand why who can actually install a heat pump, so a reverse cycle air conditioner or a heat pump hot water system. Who can install one for me and give me the rebate? It is very confusing. Now, just wondering if I can get a little pointer slide here. I don't think I can. I wish I had a pointer, but anyway. The top right-hand side, there's a box and it says the Victorian Government Victorian Energy Upgrades Program. So under that program, the Victorian Government has certified a whole bunch of products and said, okay, for this one, we're going to give them this amount of VEEC certificates. And for this one, we'll give this amount of VEEC certificates. And that's what gives the rebate value. Now, in order to administer this whole program, they have what's called accredited providers. And those companies have to fill in a whole lot of paperwork in order to become accredited providers for the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program. And their job then is to administer and create VEEC certificates and sell them. Now, when you go to the Victorian Government site and look up, you know, who can give me a rebate, they will give you a list of all of the accredited providers. And if you look at the two boxes below the top right one, so there's one that says AP Type 1 and one that says AP Type 2. All of those will be listed as providers. But then if you go and ring them all, some of them will say, no, we don't do installations, which means you end up with what I call installer Type 2, and they are the accredited providers that temporarily install whatever products get a rebate. Often, because of these being the only ones listed on the government site, it's easy to think that your only choice to get a product installed is to use an installer Type 2 because they're the only ones listed. And that's actually not true. So you can do that. The way I think about it is their business is set up to create certificates. They're not heating and cooling and hot water specialists. They're administrators of rebate certificates. They only install products that get a rebate. So as soon as that rebate ends, they'll probably stop. Well, they will stop because that's not what they do. They usually subcontract work because, as I said, they're not specialist installers. They're doing it for the time being. And they tend to win sales by having low prices and high turnover. And look, this might be what suits you. That's fine. I just want to explain what the two options are. Okay, the second option is what I call installer Type 1. They are your local heating and cooling companies, hot water companies, plumbers who have been doing it for a long time. They've got really good reputation and they want to get a heating system that works for your house. And they can work with the AP Type 1, the accredited provider Type 1, who doesn't install products, but they still generate all the certificates. So you end up working with a local specialist company, you still get the certificates, and to me, it's a safer bet because ideally you'll find a local company that has a good reputation. They've been there for ages. It means that if something goes wrong with your system, they're very likely to still be there to help you. Whereas if the work has been subcontracted, as with the accredited provider type 2, you've then got a whole chain of going, okay, well, who was the installer and how do I get onto them and how do I get my warranty sorted out and stuff like that. So look, hopefully this helps explain that a little bit, and I'll move on because it can take a long time to get through that. All right, the second major appliance that you generally are going to want to upgrade is your hot water. Almost everyone I see still has gas hot water, whether it's instant or a storage tank. And you're probably going to want to upgrade to a heat pump hot water system. I've said AKA heat pump because generally when we say heat pump, this is what we're talking about. Oops, sorry. As with the reverse cycle air conditioner, if you look first at the right-hand side, that's a resistive electric hot water system, what we all used to have. And for a kilowatt of electrical energy that goes in, it will give you a kilowatt of hot water. So it's always 1 for 1 because it's directly using energy. It's heating an element which heats the water. Whereas the heat pump hot water system will take energy in and use it to pull that free heat out of the air and then output it. So usually at least 3 times the hot water out than the electrical energy in. There's a bunch of things with this as well, and for that same reason, we've got a 1-hour webinar just on heat pump hot water systems. The kind of things are how big the tank should be, depending on how big your family is, whether it's noisy. A lot of the cheap heat pump systems that have been installed by the installer type 2 are actually pretty noisy, and so it's given them a bit of a bad reputation, but they don't need to be noisy. And you can easily find out how noisy a system is that you're thinking of. Again, refrigerant or how efficient it is. Can you time it so that you can get it to heat when you're generating solar electricity? And the rebates again. So there's a bunch of stuff, and we'll go through that in a lot more detail and have lots of time for questions at that webinar. There are rebates in this case, as well as the Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificates, the state one. You also get a federal government rebate called an STC, and most people will be able to get the Solar Vic rebate as well, which is an additional $1,000. With the Solar Vic rebate, if you've used that rebate to get solar panels, then you automatically get that $1,000 because you can get both. It didn't used to be like that. It used to be one or the other, but they've changed it. Just like the reverse cycle air conditioners, it depends what your system is that you're taking out, what you're putting in, where you're located, and who's installing it. And the third appliance that most people need to switch is the cooktop. I haven't got a picture of a gas cooktop because it's pretty obvious when you've got a gas cooktop, but it's sometimes confusing to tell the difference between a resistive electric cooktop and an induction cooktop. Those two photos, the images on the left and the middle, they look sort of similar, especially if they're not on. But if you've got one that's like the left, you can see it's got an element that's heated up. And if there's an element like that that heats up, then it's definitely a resistive electric system. An induction cooktop, it doesn't have an element and it doesn't heat the cooktop, it heats the pot that's on the cooktop. Look, if any kind of cooktop is not going to use that much energy, so if you already have an electric one, great. And then, you know, if it breaks, you can upgrade to induction, or I must say it's a much better kind of cooking experience. So that might be a reason to do it as well. If you want to just test out what induction is like, you can get what's called a portable induction cooktop. That's the picture on the right that you can pick up from a whole lot of places. I think IKEA and probably all over the place these days. And you just plug them into a regular PowerPoint and you can test out induction cooking like that. I have to say they're not quite as good, though. They don't seem to have the fine control that an actual system, an installed system does. There's a few things to think of. There's lots of benefits. They're really fast and very responsive. So when you turn them down, it's really instant. They're a lot safer because they're not heating the cooktop, and they're easier to clean because it's not heating up. A lot of people worry about their cookware and if they're going to have to replace it all, but honestly, a lot of cookware is compatible. All you need to do is get a fridge magnet and stick it on the bottom of your cookware, and if it sticks, then it's compatible. And I think when we changed over, out of all our pots and pans, there was about 4 or 5, and we got quite a lot that we needed to get rid of. So that was easy. Another one that can catch people out is what sort of bench top they have. If you have a laminate bench top,
it's no. Yeah. There's no issues on another tab. I'm
going to try to Kirsten, if you could mute. Oh, that's great. Yep. What was I saying? A laminate bench top is fine, but if you happen to have a stone bench top or a marble bench top, that can sometimes cause a hiccup because there's new rules, I think, about cutting them. But I do know of a stone cutter that can cut out your bench top if you need. So feel free to ask me for details about that. Sometimes you do need to have a separate circuit on your switchboard for the induction cooktop, so you'll need to have a talk to an electrician as well. And there is a rebate of about $200. It's fairly new, but you know that helps. It's not heaps, but it helps. All right, along with those 3 appliances, ideally what you want to do is try and get rooftop solar as well. And hey, if you can get an electric vehicle, even better. So starting with electric vehicles, the picture in the middle shows that we use, the other picture I showed you showed that we use a lot of energy for heating and hot water, but that's inside the house. Outside the house, petrol cars are often our biggest use of fossil fuels. So being able to swap that is a really big opportunity. And there is a webinar being presented by Clean Energy Nillumbik with Bryce Gatton. He's a sort of an electric car specialist. And that will be fantastic. If you've wondered about electric cars, that will be a good opportunity to learn stuff and ask him questions. There are a bunch of considerations. I know we got one recently and it was quite stressful, wondering about, charging and even charging at home. I didn't really understand it all. In the end, we're just charging from an extension cord from a PowerPoint and it's totally fine. So that's pretty much how we charge our car 95% of the time. And you can get yourself a bit organised before you go out on the road if you're going on a longer trip by downloading some of the apps for the recharge stations, because you generally can't use them without using an app or a card. So there's a few things like that, but I think once we actually got it, it was a lot easier than I imagined it would be. It's just a change in thinking. And yeah, that point there that you've got to rethink the way you refuel is very true. It's more like putting your phone on to charge overnight, if you're going to do it from home, that is. But some of the fast chargers, you can plug your car in and fill up your car in 10 minutes. It's crazy. There's a great association, the Electric Vehicle Association, with a lot of YouTube videos and information, so another great resource. And installing rooftop solar, this is absolutely great if you're going for an all-electric home, because the more that you can generate your own and pay for the appliances that you're using, the better, of course. This photo always makes people jealous we all want to have that house. Probably not many of us do, but anyway, it's something to aspire to. Cost and payback for solar is almost always worth it. Because we're in Nillumbik, probably a lot of us have well, it's more likely we might have shading issues. I know that at our house we do have loss in our panels from shading. So that's something to consider, but these days they've got so many good ways around that, that unless you've got really a lot of shading, it's probably still going to be worthwhile. There are good rebates as well. So the SolarVic rebate is about $1,400, and on top of that, you can have an additional interest-free loan of $1,400, and there are STCs, the federal rebate that goes on top of that. Battery storage, for years, me and other assessors have been saying, hopefully in a few years the price will come down and they'll be, you know, it'll be financially beneficial. It's still sort of even, but the scenario is changing for a few reasons. One is that our feed-in tariff keeps going down, which makes battery storage more viable financially. The other thing is there is a SolarVic interest-free loan of $8,800 towards battery storage. You pay it back over 4 years. It is means tested, and you've got to have a 5 kilowatt or more system, but that makes it a lot more affordable. And the other thing is we are in an area that has blackouts. I know we've had in Hurstbridge, we've had a blackout that lasted about 10 days a couple of years ago, and the only person that could charge anything was our friend who had a solar system with battery that was wired so that it was still working when there was a blackout. So there's other reasons why you might do it. Another big change that's coming is that electric cars will be more and more capable of bidirectional charging. And what that means is that you can plug your car into the inverter so that you can charge up your car while you're generating energy. And then at night time, your car is still plugged into the house, and you can run your house off it. And that's a really enticing prospect, because electric cars usually have a battery of at least 40 kilowatts. And these days you can get batteries of 100 kilowatts. So imagine having that much energy on call for a fraction of what it would cost you to put that much just standalone battery storage in your house. I believe that late last year or early this year, the government has okayed the bureaucracy has been signed that we can do bidirectional charging, but because the manufacturers have, they've now been given the green light, but they're now working out what products to bring to market. So it's still a little while, but it won't be too long at all. Now, so far, we've talked about a lot of things that have to do with appliances and big stuff that you buy. But I really want you to remember that there are 3 aspects to energy efficiency, and all of them are equally important. So the first one is the building shell, which is about just what surrounds us, what separates us inside from outside. It's our windows, insulation, drafts. And so it's really important to get things right there as well. You might choose a really efficient reverse cycle air conditioner, but if your building shell is as leaky as a sieve and you've got no insulation and all of that stuff, first of all, it's going to be really trying hard to keep up the amount of heat that you need to be comfortable. And also it's going to cost you a lot because you'll just be running it on full steam the whole time. So building shell stuff is really important, and we do have a couple of deep dive dive webinars on, we've got one on draft proofing and one on window upgrades. So if you're interested in that, they're really good ones to go to. There are a lot of window upgrades that people don't think about that are a lot lower cost than swapping to double glazing. And then the third aspect that's also equally important is your behavioural use of your house and of your appliances. Even without changing one appliance or any of your building shell, there are ways you can use your house efficiently and less efficiently. So ideally, you want to pay attention to all of these three things and make them all work together. So with the behavioural stuff, we cover that more in, one of the sessions is called Livable Homes, so that would be a good one for that. And also there's tips in the draft proofing and the Windows webinars as well. Actually, there's tips on heating and hot water in those ones as well. The building shell, this is the images on the right are from the yourhome.gov.au manual, which is fantastic. You can buy it as a book, but you can also go online and download each page as a PDF, and it's all free. Those images show what heat loss you can have in a house that isn't insulated well, in heat loss in winter and heat gain in summer. And you can see there's massive amounts in all areas: ceiling, floor and wall insulation, in windows and in air leakage. And there's a saying that I like, which is the cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. So yeah, it's great to generate energy with your big solar system, but it's even cheaper to not even have a big one because you don't need it, because you're not using the energy. And the easiest way to use less energy is to improve your building shell and improve your appliances, but also use your building shell in a way that is keeping your warmth in winter and the heat out in summer. So planning your journey. There are lots and lots of resources you can use. And so I'll talk you through how you might do it just on your own, DIY. First thing you would want to look at is go back to the start. What are your motivations? Is it that you want to save money, in which case swap gas heating probably? Is it because of health? Well, make sure there's no gas space heating in the house or cooktops. If it's environment, then it'd probably be heating again because it's got the biggest impact. But as well as the motivations, you also want to just have a think about what challenges and barriers there might be for you. So, for example, a really common thing that I come up against when I make suggestions is someone says, well, I'm open to the idea of individual reverse cycle air conditioners, but my partner hates them and they won't have them on the wall. So if that's the case, you've got to figure out how important that is. Can they be talked around? If they can't, then what are some other options? But it's sort of useful to know that in advance. The other thing is people often don't like curtains. They're really thermally efficient, but if you don't like them, it's good to know that in advance so you can look for other options. There could be other things like I already mentioned, shading on the roof that might make solar difficult, or you might think that your roof is going to need replacing, which means that you might rejig the way that you do things. Or you might say, once we move out of this house, it's probably going to get knocked down so they can build units. Well, that's probably, unless you think you've got another 10 years in there, it might make it less sort of viable to do bigger things like blow-in wall insulation, for example. Next, you're going to look at your building shell and figure out all the things you can improve with your building shell. Then you would look at your current appliances, figure out the age, what fuel source they use, how efficient they are, where you use them, how well they work. if any are faulty and if any are inside. Very occasionally I'll see, well, actually in the last few weeks I've seen a gas ducted heating burner unit inside in a cupboard, which is fairly unusual and not recommended. And seeing a gas storage hot water system inside is a little bit more common, but not very common. And again, if there was anything like that inside, I would get rid of it first priority. And then there's other things like your budget, the meter, whether you're going to need meter box upgrade, how your family uses the home. I'm a huge believer that you've got to choose things that are going to work for you. And every home is different. Every family is different. The people that live there have different needs. There's no such thing as one size fits everyone and is the best choice. It just doesn't exist. It's really important to figure out what's going to work to make you all happy and love your home and comfortable. All right, there is a wonderful electric home planner that you can download from the Nillumbik website that has all of those key appliances that we talked about and what you could swap them with and how those rate. And it's just one of those guides that will help you get your head around where you might start. So that's one good idea. There's a more general guide on Sustainability Victoria called the Household Energy Action Guide. And this one is not just appliances, but all sorts of tips and tricks. So it's worth having a look at that too and adding that to your plan. And you can book in for personal advice at council. So Ian and Mel, the sustainability officers, you can go and talk to them, and they're very knowledgeable about everything to do with home energy efficiency and appliances. So it's a great idea if you're just feeling a bit bamboozled and not sure where to begin. If you were going to do that, say if you weren't sure about appliances, I would take photos and bring them along with you, because then they'll have a better idea knowing what they are and what your options are. Another thing you can do is consider getting a professional scorecard assessment. The scorecard is an Australia-wide tool, and it's an energy rating tool for existing houses. And the whole reason it was developed is because people can get so confused, and with good reason, when you start to talk about energy efficiency. And I've just touched on some things today, but it would be quite forgivable if you get to the end and go, well, I don't know, where do I begin? So you can get a professional scorecard assessor, and hang on, I'll show you the next slide. So the things they look at are everything about the house, all of the main fixed appliances, all of the aspects of the building shell, and then they will sit down with you and go through all of your options and explain what they think the best process would be for you. And because they've actually been in your house, it's easier for them to give you advice because they've seen it and they've talked to you about how you use it and how it works. They can see how old the appliances are and whether there's leaks or whether there's issues. So that's one other option. There are also other great resources. You can look at your own household energy use by going to the AusNet My Home distributor portal. You just create a free account and you can look at your energy use data. You can get the same sort of information by getting a free in-home energy monitor installed. That's free under the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme, and it shows you your usage across the day. So it's a good way to figure out what's using energy. It's not for everyone. It seems to really suit people that like to keep on top of it and, you know, check every day about what's going on. So for some people, that's a fantastic resource. You can compare your gas and electricity rates, and it is worth doing that, especially after the rate rises in January and July, just to make sure you're paying a reasonable amount. There's a bunch of financial assistance if you happen to be low income or on a concession card, and you'll be able to get a copy of these notes. So I won't talk any more about that now. You can look it up afterwards. And there are also bank and home loan incentives. And I actually just met someone today who is a mortgage broker that specialises in green home loans. So she can organise a home loan that gets you a discount off your mortgage for like the next 5 years, and it can be between like 30 and 60,000 off the mortgage for over its life, which is pretty impressive. And Scorecard is one of the tools you can do that with. That's the professional assessment I just mentioned. There's also fantastic general information on the Your Home Guide and the Sustainability Victoria. And finally, these are a whole bunch of our upcoming webinars. You can find out more about them by going to the Nillumbik Council website and searching for Rethink Nillumbik, and you'll get to a page that lists all these events and you can book in there. Or you can go to the Going Green Solutions website and go to Rethink Nillumbik. It also has the events and copies of the blogs that have been written for Rethink and other information that we've been putting out by social media and stuff like this. The topics for the Power Up Nillumbik, I think they're all free to attend, which is excellent. And all of the webinars are being recorded. So if you happen to miss one, you can look back on it. Okay, that was a lot to cover, but I'll just check the chat box, and I'm hoping that somebody might have some questions for me. Has anyone got a question? Feel free to unmute yourself, because there's not that many of us. I think it'll be quite manageable. Anyone got a question? I'm at your disposal. And there will be on all the other sessions as well. So write a list of questions that you can bring along. Or send me a message. I don't mind that either. I can answer things by email. I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, do induction cooktops use more electricity than non-induction? Both induction and resistive electric, the amount of energy they use is very low in terms of a whole house. So I wouldn't worry about getting one or the other in that scenario. Induction cooktops use energy differently because they use it for a shorter time at a higher level. So this is where you need an electrician to look at your meter box and make sure it's going to be okay. What I can say is that there's a really big myth that circulates that if you get induction cooktop, you have to have three-phase power, and it's not at all true. That myth goes for electrifying your house in general, and it's not true. If you're interested in hearing an electrician say that, there's a fantastic series called the Switched On, I think it's called Switched On, Renew Energy. And there's one with the guy that runs Get Off Gas, I think, Brendan, and he's an electrician, and he said he's upgraded hundreds of houses to be all electric, and he's never once had to make one three-phase. I hope that answers your question, John. If it doesn't, let me know and I'll try again. And Sonia's saying, how much roughly does a heat pump hot water system cost? Right, so there are, I would say that there are three rough brackets of cost. The lowest cost is going to be the accredited providers that install, and they used to be able to do them free, but it's now been mandated they have to make the householder pay at least $200, which is good because otherwise they can just install them all over the place and no one has any buy-in because they haven't paid anything. So the minimum would be $200, and then those cheaper ones might be up to say $1,000, maybe $1,500. I would avoid them if you could, if you had the budget to avoid them. The mid-range ones will be anything from $1,500 to maybe $3,000, probably more like $2,500. And there's some great ones like brands such as Aquatech. I'm having a brain blank. We'll cover these things in the heat pump session. And then the high-end ones that use carbon dioxide as a refrigerant and are really quiet and have like a much longer warranty and stuff, that's ones like Reclaim and Sandon, and they will be anywhere from $5,000 upwards. So there's a really big difference in those, as you can tell. And I just think mid-range is fine. If you can afford high-end, do it, but mid-range is fine. I just would avoid the lower cost ones, purely for, getting the backup support and quality of installation. So John's asking, my house was built 45 years ago. If I go full electric, is there a chance the electricity feed from the street is inadequate? And what would be the likely cost if I had to have this upgraded? Now, John, this is something I can't answer because I'm not an electrician, but it would be a perfect question for Ben when we do the electrification masterclass, because that's the kind of thing he does. I do know that most houses, it's fine to go. I mean, I'm in Hurstbridge in a 1970s house, and we're fully electric, and we didn't need to do anything. So I don't think in most cases it's a problem at all. There's some really old houses where I'm talking about more like 100 years old, where there might be a little bit more of an issue, but it's usually not the case. I'm sorry I can't answer that any better, but Ben is the one that could ask that. And he probably wouldn't be able to tell you off the cuff. He would have to go to your house, but that's part of what he does.